right. Is everybody healthy and happy? Nod your head yes. Everybody
Yes.
doing well? Good. Good to hear. Everything's going well here. So welcome back to week 2 of a critique session. Last week, I kind of showed you the process that we'll go through, where I put up the work that we are going to critique, and then we go through the elements of art, texture, shape, color, line, value, to evaluate it and just simply describe what's going on. This is the, Vincent sent a piece that he wanted critiqued, so we're going to start with that. Hopefully it will just take half an hour or so. So when we have the artist here in the critique session, Vincent, this is a question that I need you to be thinking about while the rest of us describe what's happening with the elements in your work. I want you to be thinking about what it is that you need, what you want from this critique, from the rest of us. Do you want ideas on how it can be made better? Do you want people to just pat you on the back and say, oh, it's so pretty? Do you want, so you just be thinking about exactly what it is you want. And after we go through the elements analysis, then you let us know what you want and we'll guide the discussion in that direction, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to start with sharing my screen and desktop. Yeah. Share. There we go.
Ah, this one, okay.
Yep, this is the one that you sent last week that we'll work on today, and I'll get all the rest of the stuff out of the way here. So when we first start a critique, we tell the plain facts about this. Can, Vincent, can you tell us the approximate size of this piece?
It's
It's about this big by this big, right?
yes, it's 1 meter and 25 large, and 1 meter 50 centimeter high.
Okay, so it's like 3 feet by 4 feet approximately. So it's meant to be hung on the wall.
Yes.
Right. So it's a wall piece. The other, if I get anything else wrong, let me know. It's textiles, it's cottons. They're solid cottons. It's meant to be hung on the wall. We heard the size. It's got a binding around it. It looks like it's finished, not in process. And does anything else have, oh, abstract, we'll call it an abstract piece. We'll talk about the style of the piece, just describe it as that. Okay, so any of you that want to participate in this, especially if you're familiar with the way I run things, go ahead and unmute yourself and shout out. Let's start with the elements that you think are strongest. So remember, the elements are texture, shape, line, color, and value. So which one of those elements do you think is speaking the loudest here in this visual language? Anybody want to give it a try?
It's
I'd say line.
Line, okay. I don't have names by people here. Let me see.
I'm Betty Warner, and
Betty.
forgive me, this is my first week.
Okay, well, I'll walk you through it, Betty. Let's have you talk about the element of line. And Vincent, when we're critiquing your piece for the analysis part right here, or just the description of the elements, we'll let other people answer all the questions. Usually the artist is silent for the first half, and you can just take notes, or later on, if there's anything you disagree with, go ahead and let us know then. So Betsy, can you describe where you see lines in this piece?
I see the diagonal lines formed by the arrangement of color. And when I look at the piece, there's a lot to see there. But to my eye, what I see first and most strongly is the line, particularly the diagonal lines around the greenish yellow color.
Okay, good. So you are seeing the diagonal lines created by the seams, the piecework, and also created by the arrangement of the colors within the squares. So does anybody, let's combine that with the element of shape here, because shape makes up a big part of the elements here. Does anybody else want to describe the shapes they see?
Okay, it's Tracy. I saw the shapes first, which is squares set on point. And
Good.
due to the coloring of some of the squares, they actually are triangles. That's what I saw at first when I looked at it the first time. So the shape came to me right away. Then
Very good.
some of the squares are broken up because of the colorings and the where the black, the values are different. Then it highlights certain portions of that corner of the square, or it makes it look more like a diamond shape as opposed to a square.
Okay. That was excellent. I've got a crowd of people trying to use the link from last week for it, and I'm sending them the current link. Last week's I didn't have as a recurring meeting. And I can't talk and text at the same time. Okay, see if that works. And you're correct. We see squares that are on point. We see a larger, we see that they're in triangles because of both the piecework, and we see a larger triangle that is created by the arrangement of the green squares. Tracy, can you tell me about, do you remember what we talked about in class about the activity of shapes, how some shapes feel very stable and some have a lot of movement? What can you tell me about the activity of these shapes?
Well, I see some activity in the shapes because of the different colorings, and I think the fact that it's on point. So I do see some movement, although I would have expected the squares to be quite stable.
All right, let's talk about that for 1 second. So triangles and squares can be very stable, right? If you have a square that's set on the ground, that's a block, that's a brick, that's something that's not going anywhere. If you have a triangle that's set on the ground like a pyramid, that's extremely stable. But when you tip them, when you have an actual pyramid or an actual triangle shape, if you held it in your hand and put it on point, it's going to move, right? So because all of these shapes are on point, because none of them are sitting horizontally as we expect things in this world full of gravity where we do have the ground and a horizon, things that are sitting flat on the ground are more stable than things that are not sitting flat on the ground. So these shapes, these triangles, they have a feeling of movement. And also if you look up, you can include the small red and orange shapes, these boomerang shapes that are in there. And they have a direction to them as well. And they're thin enough as well that they also create lines. Not only are the orange boomerangs and the red ones arranged in a vertical line, but they are, they point your eye in a certain direction. So the function of line in the visual language is to move your eye through the piece. Shape can also create lines, like the edge of the shape, the points of the triangle. They all point your eye towards the left of the screen. And those shapes create a feeling of activity. Now, the quilt itself isn't going to get up and walk around and move around, right? Unless you've got the window open and there's a strong wind blowing inside, then the artwork itself might move. So what is moving when you are looking at this piece?
So the shapes are forcing our eyes to move along it. Also towards the bottom of the quilt, where there's some, the points on the left-hand side are of different colorings, almost like little fish. That's also creating like a ripple movement of your eye towards the left of the quilt.
Right.
So I see it quite strongly.
Right. So it's the movement of your eye as it moves around the piece. So now we've talked a little bit about the feeling of motion and activity as our eye moves around the work, both because of the way the lines direct your eye and because of the kind of shape. So line, shape, we've got texture, value, and color left. I think color is the next strongest thing. Would anybody like to simply describe the colors they see here? Anybody? All right, I'll go for it if nobody's going to be brave. And you'll see how easy it is. I see lime green as one of the dominant colors. The background is all, I feel it as a background, is neutrals from white to black and mostly gray. And that's value. Color and value are really hard to separate. They're intertwined. So we have a high value lime green, and as your eye moves across the right in the main triangle, the green gets lower and lower value until you've got a dark green and then black. And then on the opposite side of that, you've got orange and you have red. So if you're looking on a 12-step color wheel, green is opposite of red, orange is next to the red, so it's kind of a wide complementary color scheme. With the color relationships, green and red are very active, aren't they? They are very vibrant, and that's all you need to say about what the colors are. It's very simple, isn't it? Let me see if people are trying to get in. I don't have my chat turned on. Now I do, so you all can see it, and I can see it. Vincent's waving his color wheel up in the window so that you can see it.
Yes, it's not the exact complementary color, but a little bit next to complement.
It is. And when we're critiquing art, or when we're looking and analyzing art, it's incredibly rare for any work to fit in a nice, neat, perfect kind of color scheme. So we really talk about what the dominant colors are and where it is mostly. This is mostly complementary red and green with some orange thrown in. And the yellow-green might be across from the orange, have to look. Now, value is much more interesting in here. So the color in a lot of places, while it is interesting, value is doing a lot of the work here. We have in the bottom left quadrant, diagonal quadrant, if we looked at this in black and white, and often all I need to do is squint really hard to be able to see the values differently. They're very middle of the road values, right? And then in the upper quadrant, upper left quadrant, we've got a lot of contrast. There's very high value and very low value. You've got white and black in there, as well as the middle value grays. And there's more contrast between that and the lime green stripe than there is contrast along that diagonal line on the lower area. So you've got an area in the top left that attracts the eye because of the great value contrast that's happening, as opposed to the lesser value contrast that's happening on the lower left. And I am thinking that if we took a picture of the the colored area, the central square that's on point, that triangle, that much of it, there's an area of high white on the center right and an area of black and a few very, very high contrast areas with value on the right as well. So this is a really interesting piece. The colors are interesting, but the values here are doing a lot of work to create places where the eye is drawn. For instance, you've got that one black triangle right in the center in the bottom, and then below it, you've got 3 boomerangs that are facing the opposite direction. But how many of you notice them because they're not red or orange? But they add a great deal of interest to the piece because of that value contrast. So the last element that we would talk about here is the element of texture. Who would like to describe the texture? Texture is 2 things. It's the way it feels to the touch, and it is the patterning that you see on the surface. One is actual texture, the way it feels, and the other is visual texture or pattern. Is there anybody who would like to chat about that? Rosanna, do you want to try it? Lynn, sorry. I think you go by Lynn.
Oh.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I guess the stitching is basically what adds the texture for this. I can't tell from my monitor if there's stitching in the ditch, but it looks like there probably is, along with the just the vertical lines that are stitched. I don't see any horizontal
So
lines stitched across.
imagine that your eyes are closed and that you felt it, and describe what you would feel as you touched the piece.
Well, I would feel all of the seam lines
Mm-hmm.
all around every triangle, plus the parallel stitching going up and down, plus the stitching around the boomerangs, as you call them.
How would the fabric feel?
Well, this fabric looks to me like it's cotton,
Mm-hmm.
and so it would
Cotton
feel
feel.
pretty soft and
Right.
smooth.
Good. So we have the actual texture of smooth cotton interrupted by only the seam lines and the stitching. And then you were describing very well the patterns of stitching that's happening here on a diagonal grid and the vertical lines that are going up and down here. So we have the active shapes, triangles and squares that are set on point. We've got an active color, a very vibrant color scheme with green and orange and red going on. We've got a lot of value contrast in some places, very little value contrast in other places. And then the patterning of those triangles and the simplicity of those stitch lines that give it a regularity. I mean, this piece could be, there's a lot of visual activity going on with the triangles, with the movement, with the value contrast, with the colors, and perhaps giving it those just very simple vertical stitches through the center of the quilt, creating that marching regular pattern of stitching, ties it together a bit. It keeps it simple and holds it together. Let's move on a little bit to the principles of art. So the elements of art are the things that the piece is built with, right? Texture, shape, line, color, value. The principles are how they come together. Does anybody want to talk about unity here? Diane, how about you? Do you want to give it a go?
Okay, here I am. I'll try.
Okay.
Well, it's unified in that it appears that it's all the same type of fabric from the way I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all solid colors. And the shapes are, there's only really, well, the boomerang, the triangle. Wait, Are there little triangles? I can't tell.
Yeah, in some places
There's
there
little
are
triangles.
small
Okay.
triangles.
So, well, the boomerang, the triangle, and the square are,
All right, I'm trying to get it.
for the most part, the only shapes, although stitching causes some other little shapes in there.
Right. So one of the ways unity is created is through repetition. In this case, it's through repetition of shape, through repetition of direction of line, through the repetition of those things. Can you see anywhere where anything looks out of place? Sometimes that's the easiest way to describe unity, is to look for anything that doesn't feel unified. And the answer can be, no, I don't see anything that looks out of place.
I mean, if I had to find something, I would just say maybe the long black line on the far right. The long, I can't see any stitch lines in that, but that just might be my,
Yeah, there are stitch lines.
okay, so then no, I don't.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it feels like nothing is out of place. It feels very unified. Who would like to talk about symmetry and balance? Balance is which of the elements in this piece, which of the shapes or forms have the most visual weight? Is anything unbalanced, and what kind of balance? We have symmetry, asymmetry, crystallographic symmetry, radial symmetry. Nancy, are you here? Do you want to give balance and symmetry a shot? She's muted.
Can you hear me?
There you are. Now we can hear you, Nancy. Why don't you talk to us about balance and symmetry?
Okay. So I'm looking at balance as it relates to the color and colors. We have a lot of, we have that dark black rectangle on the far right, plus the black triangles right next to it, and the dark green triangles next to that. They, because they're dark or black, provide weight. But over on the left-hand side, up in the left-hand corner, we also have some black triangles and dark gray triangles that balance that weight. If they weren't there, it would look like it would want to tip over.
Okay, good. Can you describe, is it symmetrical or asymmetrical?
This is asymmetrical.
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Diane. Mary, do you want to try talking about, what do we have? Balance, symmetry, scale, and proportion. Talk about the scale and proportion of the, like the proportion of the shapes to each other here.
I just managed to get to look at it. So I'm still fighting the computer.
Okay. Anybody else? Ellen. We have Ellen Hart and then Ellen without a last name. Ellen without a last name, do you want to give it a try?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Were we talking about balance? Is that the idea?
We were talking about balance. Do you want to talk about scale and proportion of the elements within this piece?
Sure. So it's made up of small units of triangles, or if you look at it carefully, squares set on point, which gives the whole overall a unity because it's made up of all similar shapes.
Okay. What about the proportion of the shapes within the piece itself? For instance, I see a large square on point formed with the lime green on the left half and the darker green, the far right part of it is cut off. But I see that large square which is large in proportion to the smaller squares that it's made out of. And the scale of the boomerangs is very slender, very slim in relation to the size of the squares of everything else. And it's interesting to me that even though they are skinny, small shapes, I mean, look at the proportion of how much red there is in this piece next to how much green there is. If you needed enough fabric to cut out the orange and the red, you would only need a tiny bit of it compared to how much gray and black and white and green you would need, right? But how interesting is it that you only need a tiny bit of the red and the orange, and it has the same visual weight, even though the proportion, the actual size of those pieces is much less than how much green there is. Why do you think that is? Why is the orange and the red equally balanced with all of that green?
Still me?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's complementary.
Yeah, also that nice hot red and orange. They're very powerful colors. They will speak loudly in any piece that they're in, unless yellow is there. In this case, the green leans quite a bit towards yellow, but because it's next to the red, it reads much more as green than it would otherwise. Let's talk about the feeling of, is there a feeling of depth and space here? That's another one of the principles. Ellen Hart, do you want to try? You're not muted, so you can just speak up.
She sent something in the chat that she's not muted, but we can't hear her.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ellen.
She must be struggling with something.
Okay, Liz.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I lost the track of the question.
What were we talking? Do you get a sense of depth and space from this piece, and what would give you that sense?
The portion with the green steps forward. The darker portion, especially in the upper left-hand corner, feels like it's moving behind it.
That's very interesting. Let's figure that out for a minute. So I feel kind of that same thing. You know, other people might not feel the same. This is obviously a flat piece, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a flat piece. It's not a sculptural piece with a lot of form away from the wall, but still we feel there's this green part that's in front of the black part, even though they're right next to each other. One of the reasons that is because dark values tend to move away from our vision while high values tend to come forward. It's all about value doing part of that work.
I would like to say something about that, though. I don't agree necessarily that they unambiguously slide one on top of the other, giving depth, because of that left-hand line of orange, which joins them up.
Yeah.
Good. And there's no one right answer here. There is no one right answer. People can look at it in different ways. If I want to look at it as having depth and space, or the illusion of depth and space, to my eye, the orange there is in front of the green, which is in front of the black and white. And everybody, and you could look at it as one, you know, one nice flat plane where they're all joined together.
What I like about that, though, is that it's ambiguous.
Nice.
Also, when you see where the green and the dark meet, the dark triangles are often interrupted by the green. The green triangles are not, oh wait, are they? No, to me, the green triangles seem as interrupted by the black and the dark gray, but the black and the dark gray seem to be cut off by the green.
Right. And this is when you get into the principles, again, there's never only one right answer to everything. We all see and view things in a different way. Who hasn't had a chance to go at it yet? And let's talk about the feeling of rhythm and motion in this work. I should really keep notes about who's had a chance to talk. Was that somebody? Diane has. Laurie, have you had a chance to talk?
No, you got to hear my dogs though.
Okay. Well, they sound really good right now.
We're pretty good. They got through the initial. And so I'm sorry, Lyric, again, we're talking about
rhythm and motion. What kind of rhythm, what kind of motion do you feel from this piece and why?
the rhythm. I really appeals to me. I think the repetition of the blocks, the on-point blocks, and it feels like it's marching. It's almost a staccato feeling. I don't know if staccato has a feeling.
It does. In music, staccato is when the notes are very short and very
Right.
separated. So the rhythm of movement that you see here is the pattern of movement as your eye moves across the piece. So
Right.
legato is when all the notes are joined together in a very smooth way. And we have parts here that are joined, but they're all broken up. So the eye has to move from shape to shape. They're delineated by the seams. You've got the, none of the triangles are, well, some of them are complete, but they're interrupted by those gray parts, right?
Right. That's,
So, I'm sorry, go ahead. What else would you like to say?
yeah, well, I was going to say, and then it is in that same staccato that I feel the motion of the
Right.
piece, of the piece moving. It's as opposed to my eye flowing across it, my eye kind of starts and stops and starts and stops as it moves.
Okay, is there anything else that causes that start and stop? And is there any other way that you would describe that pattern of movement?
Perhaps with the contrast, the light to the dark.
Right. Okay, so that's really interesting too. Look at the upper left quadrant and see how sharply delineated the movement is of your eye because of the high contrast in light and dark. And then look down at the lower left and
Right.
how much more smoothly everything moves with your eye, even though there are different colors down there, but the values down there are very close to each other. So they're much more integrated, mixed, they're the same. So your eye flows across them more as one whole piece than with the pattern of movement. All right, so before we unmute Vincent and let him talk to us about the piece, is there anything that this reminds you of? Is there anything that this makes you feel or remember? Again, the language we use here is not this is good, this is bad, anything. It's just each of you have a unique perspective and a unique set of memories and a unique vision that you bring to this. So I always find it really interesting to hear what you think about it. Before Vincent tells us whether it has a title or what he was thinking or the story behind it, I'd like to see what this brings up in your memories.
I'd like to say that for me, it reminds me very much of birds in the sky, although the colors are not at all reminiscent of sky. They could be reminiscent of trees or a landscape, but those little wedge shapes, to me, just read like birds moving across some kind of landscape or some kind of space.
Very good, Roseanne. Who else was talking?
Tracy, yeah, if I
Tracy?
can.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Opposite to what Roseanne sees, while I've been listening to everybody, I've been sitting back further away from my computer screen, and the little boomerang shapes in the bright orange and red, and then also towards the right third, there's little white ones which show up even more when you stand back from it. The whole thing then reminds me of fishes swimming in the sea. And even the bottom left-hand part where the little triangles are, then also look like different fishes that are swimming along to the right. And the big sort of, the square of the colors then looks like the bigger fish that's swimming in the background. So very opposite to the birds in the sky, and we go down to the sea.
Good. I'll just go down the list. That was Roseanne and Tracy so far. Ellen, do you have anything?
Well, I don't see objects, but I see motion that is crossing each other. If you can see my hands.
Yeah.
So the little arrow shapes, I call them, but boomerangs or whatever anyone has been calling them, and the triangles are arrows pointing for direction. But because there are arrows pointing both to the right and to the left, I'm not seeing any up and down movement, but I'm seeing right to left and left to right blending, which is, I've actually done a quilt on that long ago on that very idea, so maybe that's why I'm noticing it.
Okay, good. Liz, how about you?
To me, it reminds me of cut glass. Maybe because I have a bottle with this same kind of pattern of it's just the same pattern, and then there's light and dark hits it in different ways. So that the boomerangs remind me of an extra little bit of light that hits one part of the glass. Nice.
Okay, Betty, how about you?
I find myself wanting to talk about one section that I'm having trouble taking my eyes off of now that I notice it. To the right, where the dark green is, and then the whitish, bluish, and the gray. My eye, now that I've looked at it for a while, my eyes go across and then they stop there, and it almost looks like it comes up. It's like there's a change in feel and a change in how I'm supposed to see it when I get to that section. I'm not sure I've made it clear what area I'm talking about.
Over on the right where it's darker. Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes down into the point, what would be the point of that square, and and it's a little different than the left part of it, but it seems like it belongs. It fascinates me. I'd love to know what he was thinking when he.
We'll hear in a minute.
Yeah.
Ellen Hart, if you type to me, I can read it to everybody. Does anybody else? Has anybody else not had a chance to talk at all besides Vincent?
Me.
Tell me.
Yeah, I see the fish was the first thing that I thought about. Going over to the left, but the more I look at it, I see some fish going to the right too. But I also see springtime expressed there, where the green is coming out of the darkness of winter, and the orange and red are the beginning of blooms, just the very beginning of them as spring comes.
Okay, very nice. Anybody else before Vincent?
Mine's a little, I see jaws. So the green in so the shark is coming from the left and his mouth is wide open, and the light green are his teeth. And he's eating that shape that's the darker green and the black. You see what I'm putting in there?
That's great.
So if you squint it, and like his eyes, the dark black at the top, and then his body's the lighter gray at the bottom.
That's great.
Definitely has to do with being quarantined for 2 weeks.
Sure.
It's a very big fish.
Okay, Vincent, your turn. Lovely piece, by the way. Why don't you tell us if it has a title, what you were thinking when you made it, if you had any discoveries during the process, any challenges. Tell us whatever it is you want to tell us about the work.
Okay, I can't speak so good English, but I try to say
You
a
are
little bit.
fine.
I think it can be a gift for a hangglider pilot.
Oh, a hang
I
glider.
see
Mhm.
hangglider pilot.
Ah,
In German, we say pilot,
hmm.
Dragenkleider.
I
Dragon
see that.
is another. Yes,
Yeah, hang gliders have that very triangular shape, so
yes,
I
yes.
can
It's
totally
a
see that in there.
series from hanggliders.
Okay, good. Did everything
They
go
they
smoothly
move
with navigation?
they move to the left,
Mhm.
and there is a big landscape, and the landscape is green and dark mountains and
Mm.
value, and it's like a series from hang gliders going to the left, and the black hang gliders going to the right on the down side.
Right. If you've watched hang gliders, as they try to catch the hot air currents that rise, they're changing directions all the time as well. They rarely just go in one straight line and continue that. So, except for here in North Carolina, where we have a giant sand dune by the beach where the Wright brothers worked on their airplane, where they have hang gliding lessons all the time, and a lot of times they go in one direction as they're trying to lift off from the dune, and that's straight down nose first into the sand. It's entertaining. We've spent hours there. So Vincent, what would you like from us? Is there anything else that you want from us in this critique?
For me, it was very interesting to hear what all the people can see in this quilt. It's like a big fish and other things. It's a good idea. I'm very crazy things.
Okay, and have you gotten enough information about what is happening here? Any other questions? Do you have any questions for the rest of us?
No, I don't have questions.
Okay.
But I find it's nice the fantasy of the people can make in this quilt.
Good, good. It is, especially with abstract work, one of my favorite things to do is not read the title, not read the artist statement, so that you come to the work by itself. You're just seeing the elements. You're just seeing the texture, shape, and line, and color and value, and how they function together. And you come and view it through your own lens. And it's so much fun to talk with your friends about what each of you see. It's like looking at clouds and everybody sees a different thing because of the different things in our brains. And so it's lovely. Again, I encourage all of you to allow all of your viewers to have their own experience with your work. And don't be upset if they don't get exactly what you wanted. Again, if you have a literal message that your work needs to say, you know, often that's written in the title or in the artist statement, or it's obvious in the piece. But with an abstract work like that, it's lovely to let people come. All right. Well, we have 15 minutes left. I would like to just open it up and we will stop screen share and just talk to everybody. I'm going to unmute everybody. And do any of you have questions for me? I'd be happy to answer any questions kind of about absolutely anything. Yes, Mary.
I just wanted your view, since we're talking about like just looking at a piece on its own. So many art shows, even if you have an abstract piece or an art quilt, still want you to put an artist statement describing it. It drives me crazy.
You really want my view?
I just want to know your opinion.
And it's entirely my opinion, because
Yeah.
I think some people who are abstract artists really do have things that they're saying with their abstract work. And they want people to understand that thing. I hate artist statements myself, unless it's something literal that I'm teaching people about, that I want them to understand. Otherwise, I'm one of those people that drive other people crazy. I'd rather just number all my pieces. But that's me personally, when I'm working abstractly. When I'm working figuratively, or when I'm working with a landscape, often the title or the story of the piece has a story that's much more literal and easy to understand. But that's entirely just an opinion. There's no one right and wrong way. If you look at my YouTube channel, I posted a visit. Susan Brubaker-Knapp and I went to the North Carolina Museum of Art, and we could have spent all day if our feet had not given out before then. But she looks at art in a completely different way. I love looking at it in this objective way, and then pulling out any personal meaning. And she goes straight for the emotion. She's like, to me, this piece is about, they're angry with each other. I'm like,
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, it's important to make the people happy with my quilts, and nice colors, and to make happy the people. That
Right.
is for me important.
Good. And every artist has a different thing. For most of my work, I do just want to create beauty. I want to uplift people, especially with my abstracts. My abstracts, usually I'm just making a pretty quilt, right? A pretty work of art. I do make pieces that aren't pretty. And sometimes they're message-driven pieces that are not a happy message. But that's usually very obvious in the piece. Any other questions?
This is Laurie.
Hi,
And
Laurie.
though, I see so much artwork, whether it's print or whatever, that is actually titled. And I find myself fascinated because as I'm creating, I'm generally creating to a title that I started with.
Mm.
But yet the titles end up lost on the back of the quilt, as opposed to if screen, you know, my stepmother, who was a screen print artist, all of her stuff is titled on the front. And anyhow, I just think it's interesting, you know, as textile artists and quilters, we tend to put that important information on the back side, not on the front side.
Yeah, well, in an art gallery, it's also posted next to the work. If it's hung with signage. And there's no right or wrong way. There's absolutely no one way to do it. And isn't it fabulous that there's a billion different kinds of way to be right as an artist? I mean, the only way for you to work correctly yourself as an artist is to do it the way that works best for you. Who's next? What else do you want to ask?
I have a question. This is Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi. Lots of times when I'm working on something, I have what I call a love-hate relationship with it. I love the idea when I start. I generally hate it when I get going. And then at periodic times, I like it again, and then I hate it, and then I like it, and then I hate it. Just wondering if anybody else goes through the same kind of process.
Yes.
I totally do. I'm totally there with you. And sometimes I hate it enough that I have to put it away for a while. And sometimes when I come back to it, the problem that was there is solved and I know what to do next. Sometimes it's not, but I have a deadline and I have to work through it anyway. And sometimes it ends up that I just look at it and analyze it and learn what I needed to learn from that work and just let it go. But I think that's totally normal for everybody, almost everybody, to have that it's going well, it's not going well. It's happy, I hate this piece. You know, I know exactly what to do. I have no idea what to do. most of the people who only work exactly, they're totally happy with it the whole time, have their method, have their ideas down, and they're not pushing themselves out of that box ever, which is okay with some people. If you're happy in your box, stay in your box. No reason not to. But when you push yourself, yeah, Vincent?
It's always a process to make a quilt. I have to interrupt for 2 days, and then I have in my unconsciousness, I have an idea, and then I can make the next step for the quilt. It's a process, and it's not made in 1 day.
Right.
And I have to sleep 1 or 2 nights for
the
this
ideas
process
to work and for the process to go. Yeah, I think that's totally normal. Anybody else? Questions?
I have a question.
Go, Ellen.
Just a survey, maybe. How many quilts do we all work on at the same time? I have a tendency to work on one at a time, and if I haven't finished it, I'm blocked from anything else, even though I have lots of ideas. And I see that as something of a problem for myself, because I would like to be different, but I think it's interesting to hear other people talk about that.
I'm ADD, so I have, okay. Do you guys see that pile back there?
Yes.
There's probably 30 in-process pieces just in that little pile. There's bigger ones through the window back there. Can I show you my current project that I'm working on right now?
Yes.
Not the mustache. Yes.
I have to make the same today.
With a mustache?
Yes.
Bill,
I will,
this is
I will
Lori.
show you.
Go, Lori.
I can only work on one at a time, depending on the process. So what I find I'm doing is I'm piecing until it's pieced, and then I have another piece that I'm working on that I'm quilting it. And I also have stuff going on in my head where I'm creating the next thing. So for me, that's kind of that's how my brain works. But I do think it's interesting because so many of my fellow quilters, we are so different. I do not do well with UFOs piled up around me. My brain, I lose focus on all of it. I can't. So I have to be very, I don't know, linear in the project.
And whatever works for you is how you should work. One thing I do encourage, whether you're linear or not linear, is to keep some sort of notebook or sketchbook. I have like 40 little sketchbooks stashed in every place. But I know things don't stick in my brain, so I jot down ideas constantly. I finally have started on my iPhone with my notes program, taking pictures of the ideas and organizing them in one folder so I can actually find where that idea is instead of having to hunt for which of the current 20 sketchbooks I stashed it in. But I encourage you to record those ideas, to keep them as they come. And then while you're working linearly, you'll have that resource to come back to. All good?
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Y'all stay safe and healthy.
Yep.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye, and thank you.